The late September sun hung low over the quiet streets of Fairview, a small town on the outskirts of Atlanta, casting golden streaks across the cracked asphalt. James Carter eased his weathered pickup truck to a stop at the end of his street, the engine rumbling softly before falling silent. He leaned back in the driver's seat, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. Another long day of fixing pipes and wiring at the local textile mill had left his hands rough and his shoulders heavy. At 28, James, a black man with a steady gaze and a frame built from years of manual work, carried himself with the quiet strength of someone who knew the value of persistence. His life was simple: work, home, the occasional beer with friends, but it was his, earned through sweat and stubborn resolve. As he stepped out, his boots crunching against the gravel, his eyes drifted to the house next door. The faded green shutters and overgrown lawn hadn't changed in 8 years, not since the Chen family moved away. The house stood empty, a ghost of the past, holding memories of a girl who once filled it with laughter. Sophia Chen, the bright-eyed kid who used to trail him like a shadow, had been gone since she was 14, her family chasing better opportunities in Atlanta's gleaming core. James hadn't heard from her since, but the absence of her presence lingered like a half-forgotten song. He was halfway to his porch when a glint of chrome caught his eye. A sleek Mercedes, polished to a mirror shine, sat in front of the Chen house, its presence as out of place as a diamond in a coal mine. James froze, his tool bag slipping slightly in his grip. The driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out, her movements precise, deliberate. Long black hair fell past her shoulders, catching the fading light, and her tailored navy blazer spoke of a world far beyond Fairview's modest streets. She turned, and James's breath caught. Those eyes, dark, warm, with a spark of mischief, belonged to Sophia Chen. She saw him, and a smile broke across her face, slow and knowing, like she'd been waiting for this moment. Sophia crossed the street, her heels clicking softly, and stopped a few feet away. Up close, she was both the girl he remembered and a stranger, poised, powerful, her presence commanding in a way that made the air feel heavier. At 36, she was no longer the scrawny kid who climbed trees and scribbled dreams in notebooks. She was a woman who owned rooms before she entered them. "James Carter," she said, her voice smooth but laced with teasing warmth. "Do you still remember that promise you made me all those years ago? You said if I grew up strong, you'd marry me." The words hit like a spark in dry grass, igniting memories James had buried deep. He saw flashes of summer evenings, Sophia's laughter as they tossed a basketball, her small hand clutching his when she was scared. The promise had been a boy's playful vow, spoken to a girl who looked at him like he could fix the world. Now, standing before him, she was a CEO, a name he'd glimpsed in business articles, a woman who'd conquered Atlanta's tech scene. And yet, her smile held the same defiance, daring him to answer. James opened his mouth, but words failed him. His heart thudded, a mix of joy, shock, and something heavier, fear, maybe. That the gap between their worlds was too wide to bridge. Before he could respond, Sophia laughed, a soft, melodic sound that broke the tension. "What, James? Don't tell me you forgot me already." The familiarity in her voice disarmed him, and he found himself chuckling, the sound rough but genuine. "Nah, Sophia, nobody forgets you." The words slipped out, carrying more truth than he intended. For a moment, the years melted away, and they were just two kids again, standing under the Georgia sun. "Come on," he said, nodding toward his house. "Let me get you something to drink. You don't roll into Fairview looking like that and expect to stand in the street." Sophia's eyes softened, and she followed him across the patchy lawn to his small, weathered home. Inside, the air smelled of wood polish and faint traces of motor oil. The living room was modest, with a worn couch, a coffee table stacked with repair manuals, and a single photo of James's parents on the wall. He led her to the kitchen, where sunlight spilled through a cracked window, painting the old oak table in warm hues. It was the same table where, years ago, he'd sat with a younger Sophia, helping her with algebra or listening to her ramble about wanting to build computers. James busied himself at the counter, pulling out a tin of peppermint tea and setting a kettle to boil. Sophia sat, her fingers tracing the table's familiar grain, her gaze distant but content. "This place hasn't changed," she murmured. "Still feels like home." He glanced over his shoulder, catching the wistfulness in her tone. "Yeah. Well, Fairview don't move fast, unlike some people." He meant it as a joke. But the weight of her success hung between them, unspoken. She was Sophia Chen, tech prodigy, while he was still James, the guy who fixed leaks for a living. The kettle whistled, and he poured 2 mugs, sliding one across to her. Their fingers brushed briefly, and James felt a jolt like touching a live wire. Sophia sipped her tea, her eyes never leaving him. "So," she said, leaning back, "you gonna tell me you've been waiting for me to come back and claim that promise?" James froze, the mug halfway to his lips. Her tone was playful, but her gaze was steady, searching. He set the mug down, his mind racing. 8 years had carved a chasm between them, her world of boardrooms and his of wrenches and sweat. Yet here she was, sitting in his kitchen, stirring up promises he'd made when life was simpler. He wanted to ask why she'd come back, what she wanted, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he met her eyes, his voice low. "Sophia, you know I don't forget promises, but you're gonna have to tell me what you're really doing here." Her smile faltered, just for a heartbeat, and James saw something flicker in her expression. Vulnerability, maybe, or hope. The moment stretched, fragile and heavy, as the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving them in the soft glow of the kitchen light. The kitchen light cast a warm glow over the oak table where James Carter and Sophia Chen sat, the steam from their peppermint tea curling into the air. Outside, the Fairview evening settled into a quiet hum, crickets chirping faintly beyond the cracked window. James's hands rested on his mug, his calloused fingers tracing its rim, but his mind was elsewhere, pulled back by Sophia's teasing words about a promise made long ago. Her presence, so unexpected after 8 years, stirred memories that felt as vivid as the Georgia sun they'd once shared. As Sophia sipped her tea, her eyes soft with nostalgia, James let himself slip into the past, to the days when their world was smaller, simpler, and bound by a vow neither fully understood. 10 years ago, Fairview was a patchwork of modest homes and dusty lots, where kids played basketball in driveways and the scent of barbecue lingered on summer evenings. James, then 18, was a lanky young man with dreams bigger than his circumstances. He worked part-time at his father's repair shop, fixing generators and plumbing for neighbors, his hands already rough from wrenches and solder. The town knew him as the kid who could fix anything, always ready with a smile and a quick joke. But to Sophia Chen, the 12-year-old girl next door, he was something more. A protector, a confidant, a hero. Sophia, with her quick mind and quicker tongue, was a spark in Fairview's quiet streets. Her parents, Chinese immigrants who ran a small grocery, had instilled in her a fierce drive to succeed, but her accent and background made her a target for the town's less kind children. She'd come home with scuffed knees or a quivering lip, hiding her hurt behind a defiant glare. James, older and wiser in her eyes, noticed it all. He'd see her sitting alone on her porch, scribbling in a notebook, and he'd wander over, tossing a basketball to break the silence. One afternoon, under the sprawling sycamore tree behind their houses, Sophia's courage got the better of her. She'd climbed too high, chasing a stray kite, and lost her footing. The crack of a branch snapped through the air, and she hit the ground hard, her ankle twisting beneath her. James, shooting hoops nearby, dropped the ball and sprinted over, his heart pounding. He knelt beside her, brushing dirt from her cheek. "You okay, kid?" he asked, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. Sophia's eyes glistened, but she bit her lip, refusing to cry. "I'm fine," she mumbled, though her wince betrayed her. James scooped her up, carrying her to her porch, his arms strong and sure. As he set her down and bandaged her ankle with a makeshift wrap, Sophia looked at him, her voice small. "You're always here, James. You gonna stay forever? Who are you gonna marry when you're old?" The question caught him off guard, and he laughed, a deep, warm sound that eased her pain. "Marry? I don't know, Soph. But if you grow up strong and come back to find me, I'll keep my promise. I'll pick you." It was a boy's playful vow, meant to make her smile, but Sophia's eyes lit up, clutching the words like a treasure. From that day, James became her anchor. He taught her how to solve equations, strum basic chords on his old guitar, and stand up to bullies with words instead of tears. They'd sit under the sycamore, sharing dreams. Hers of building machines that could change the world. His of owning a repair shop where no one was turned away. Sophia scribbled their promise on a postcard, her handwriting shaky but determined. "I'll come back, James. Just wait for me." He tucked it into his pocket, grinning, never imagining how heavy those words would become. Their bond grew through countless evenings, from shared ice cream cones to late-night talks on her porch. But when Sophia was 14, her parents announced they were moving to Atlanta's city center, chasing better schools and opportunities. The night before she left, they sat on her porch steps, the air thick with unsaid goodbyes. Sophia pressed the postcard into his hand, her eyes wet. "Don't forget, James. I'll be back." He nodded, his throat tight, and watched her family's car disappear down the street, leaving the house next door dark and silent. Back in the present, James's gaze drifted to the kitchen window, where the sycamore still stood, its branches swaying in the evening breeze. The postcard, faded but intact, lay in a drawer upstairs, a relic of a promise he'd never dared to hope would hold. Sophia's voice pulled him back. "You're quiet," she said, her mug cradled in her hands. "Thinking about that tree?" He smiled faintly, the weight of those childhood days settling over him. "Yeah, thinking about a kid who climbed too high and a promise I didn't know I'd have to keep." Sophia's expression softened, and for a moment, they were just James and Soph, two souls tethered by a vow made under a Georgia sky. But the question lingered, unspoken. What did that promise mean now, in a world that had changed them both? The kitchen in James Carter's Fairview home glowed under the soft light of a single bulb, its warmth a stark contrast to the cooling September night outside. The faint scent of peppermint tea lingered, mingling with the earthy trace of motor oil that clung to James's work clothes. Across the oak table, Sophia Chen sat with her hands wrapped around her mug, her dark eyes reflecting a mix of nostalgia and quiet resolve. The laughter from their reunion had faded, replaced by a heavier silence, one that carried the weight of 8 years apart. James leaned back in his chair, his steady gaze meeting hers, but beneath his calm exterior, his mind churned with questions. Why had Sophia come back? What did she want from a promise made by a boy who barely knew himself? 8 years ago, when Sophia's family left Fairview for Atlanta's bustling core, the world seemed to split in two. For Sophia, the city was a crucible. She excelled in high school, her sharp mind earning scholarships to Georgia Tech, where she studied computer engineering. By 25, she'd founded a tech startup, and by 36, she was CEO of a company that powered half the city's data systems. Her face graced business magazines, her name synonymous with innovation. But success came at a cost. Boardrooms were lonely, relationships fleeting, and the weight of being a trailblazing Asian American woman left her guarded, always proving herself. Through it all, she carried a quiet ache for Fairview, for the boy who'd once made her feel safe. She'd typed James's name into search engines more times than she'd admit, but pride and fear he'd moved on kept her from reaching out. James, meanwhile, stayed rooted in Fairview. The repair shop he'd dreamed of never materialized. Instead, he became a skilled technician, fixing electrical systems and plumbing for factories and homes. His life was steady, predictable, built on long days and quiet nights. Friends urged him to leave, to chase bigger dreams in Atlanta. But Fairview was home. Its familiar streets a tether to his past. The postcard Sophia had given him, with her childish scrawl promising to return, sat in a drawer, its edges worn from years of handling. He'd look at it sometimes, wondering if she'd forgotten the boy who'd vowed to wait. Had she found someone else in her glittering world? The question gnawed at him, but he buried it, convincing himself the promise was just a kid's game. Now, in the present, Sophia set her mug down, the soft clink breaking the silence. "Atlanta's not what people think," she said, her voice low, almost confessional. "It's bright, loud, full of people who want a piece of you. But it's empty too. I kept thinking about this place, about you." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning James wasn't sure he could trust. He shifted, his fingers tightening around his mug. "You did good, Soph. I saw your name in the papers. CEO, big deals. You're a long way from climbing trees." His tone was warm but guarded, masking the flicker of doubt in his chest. She was a star, and he was still the guy with grease under his nails. Sophia's lips curved, a half smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And you're still here, fixing things, keeping promises." She leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "You never left, James." "Why?" The question caught him off guard, like a wrench slipping in his hand. He could have said it was for his parents, for the town, but the truth was simpler and harder. "Didn't see a reason to go," he said finally. "Everything I cared about was here." He didn't say her name, but it lingered between them, unspoken. Sophia's expression softened, and for a moment, vulnerability cracked her polished facade. "I came back because I needed to know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That promise we made. It wasn't just a game to me. I'm here, James, stronger than I ever thought I could be. So tell me, are you still keeping it?" Her words landed like a stone in still water, rippling through him. James's heart thudded, torn between joy and fear. She was everything he'd imagined, fierce, brilliant, unafraid. But the gap between their worlds loomed larger than ever. Could he hold her to a vow made in innocence? Did she even want him? Or was this just nostalgia pulling her back? He met her gaze, his voice steady but raw. "Sophia, I never forgot. But you gotta tell me what you're asking for. 'Cause I'm not sure I'm the man you need." Sophia's eyes flickered with something. Hope, maybe, or defiance. "Then let me show you," she said, her voice firm. "I'm not leaving until you tell me where we stand." The kitchen in James Carter's Fairview home felt smaller now, the air thick with the weight of Sophia Chen's question. The single bulb overhead cast soft shadows across the oak table, where their empty mugs sat, the peppermint tea long gone cold. Outside, the September night wrapped the town in quiet, broken only by the distant hum of a passing car. Sophia leaned forward, her dark eyes locked on James, fierce and unwavering, yet softened by a vulnerability that made his chest ache. Her words, "I'm not leaving until you tell me where we stand," hung between them, a challenge and a plea. James's hands rested on the table, his fingers twitching with the urge to reach for her, but doubt held him back. Could he bridge the chasm of 8 years? The gap between her world of glass towers and his of wrenches and sweat? James exhaled, his voice low, rough with the struggle inside him. "Sophia, you've got everything out there in Atlanta. Power, respect. A name people know. You're strong, just like you promised you'd be. Me, I'm still the guy fixing pipes in Fairview. If you stay, what happens when you realize this town, this life ain't enough?" Sophia's expression tightened, not with anger, but with a quiet resolve that reminded him of the girl who'd once faced down bullies with nothing but words. She slid her chair closer, the scrape of wood against linoleum sharp in the stillness. James, I've lived that life, she said, her voice steady but laced with pain. I've sat in boardrooms, signed deals, smiled for cameras. I've dated men with titles, men who promised me the world. But none of them made me feel safe. Not like you did when I was a kid. Not like you do now. Her fingers brushed the table's edge, inches from his. That promise we made, it wasn't just a game. It was my anchor, the one thing I held on to when Atlanta tried to swallow me whole. Her words cut through him, stirring something deep, a warmth he'd buried under years of routine. But fear clung to him, heavy as the tools in his belt. He looked away, his gaze settling on the cracked window, where the sycamore tree's silhouette swayed in the dark. You say that now, Soph, he murmured. But what happens when the city calls you back? When your friends, your colleagues, tell you you're throwing it all away for some small-town guy who can't keep up? Sophia's hand moved then, swift and sure, closing over his. Her touch was warm, grounding, and James felt his breath catch like he'd touched a live wire. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper, fierce and unyielding. I don't care what they think. I've spent years chasing what everyone else wanted for me. I'm done guessing, James. I'm here, choosing you. But if you don't want this, if you can't trust me to stay, then tell me now, and I'll walk away. For good. The finality in her words hit him like a blow. The thought of her leaving again, of the house next door staying empty forever, twisted something inside him. He saw it clearly. A life without her. The same quiet days stretching on, the postcard in his drawer a fading relic. But he also saw the risk, her giving up Atlanta's lights for Fairview's simplicity, only to regret it. His jaw tightened, his mind racing, but her hand in his anchored him. Pulling him back to the moment, James turned his hand, lacing his fingers through hers, the roughness of his calluses meeting the softness of her skin. He looked into her eyes, seeing the girl who'd trusted him with her dreams, and the woman who'd fought to become everything she'd promised. Sophia, he said, his voice raw, I've loved you since you were that kid climbing trees. Even when I didn't know it, I kept that postcard, kept waiting. Even when I thought you'd forgotten me. I'm scared I'm not enough for you, but if you're choosing me, I'm not letting you go again. Sophia's breath hitched, her eyes glistening with tears that didn't fall. She stood, closing the small distance between them, and placed her other hand on his shoulder, her touch steady but trembling. You've always been enough, she whispered. You were my home before I knew what home meant. I'm not asking for Atlanta, James. I'm asking for you. The air seemed to still, the world narrowing to the space between them. James rose, his height towering over her, but his movements were gentle, deliberate. He cupped her face, his thumbs brushing her cheeks, and for a moment they simply stood, breathing in sync, the weight of 8 years dissolving in the warmth of their closeness. I love you, Sophia, he said, the words spilling out, unguarded. I'll keep that promise every damn day, if you'll have me. Sophia's tears broke free, sliding silently down her face, but her smile was radiant, unguarded. She wrapped her arms around him, pulling him close, her head resting against his chest. James held her tightly, his heart pounding. The scent of her hair, a mix of jasmine and city air, filling his senses. The kitchen, with its chipped mugs and worn table, became a sanctuary, a place where two souls, separated by time and distance, finally chose each other. They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, as the night deepened outside. The sycamore tree rustled, a quiet witness to their reunion. James pressed a kiss to her forehead, his voice a low murmur. You're really here, Soph. You came back. She tilted her head up, her eyes shining. And I'm staying, she said, her voice firm, a vow of her own. We've got a lot to figure out, but we'll do it together. James nodded, his fear still there, but overshadowed by a certainty he hadn't felt in years. They sank back into their chairs, hands still entwined, the future uncertain, but no longer daunting. The promise they'd made as children had been a spark. Now it was a flame, steady and bright, ready to face whatever came next. The autumn sun dipped low over Fairview, painting the modest streets with hues of amber and gold. James Carter's small home stood at the heart of the town, its porch now adorned with a string of paper lanterns, their soft glow flickering in the evening breeze. Inside, laughter and the clink of glasses spilled out, mingling with the scent of grilled corn and homemade pie. A small gathering of neighbors and friends filled the backyard, their voices warm under the sprawling sycamore tree. At the center of it all were James and Sophia Chen, hand in hand, their smiles quiet but radiant. 8 weeks had passed since Sophia's return, since the night they'd chosen each other in the glow of James's kitchen. And tonight marked a new beginning, not a grand wedding, but a celebration of a promise kept. The months hadn't been easy. Sophia's decision to stay in Fairview raised eyebrows in Atlanta's tech circles. Her colleagues sent emails laced with concern, urging her back to the city's gleaming towers, while her parents, still rooted in their urban life, questioned why she'd trade boardrooms for a small town. In Fairview, whispers followed James and Sophia, some admiring, others skeptical of a CEO tying her life to a technician. But Sophia faced it all with the same defiance she'd shown as a child, her hand firm in James's. She turned down lucrative offers from rival companies, choosing instead to teach coding to local kids, her laptop open on James's oak table as she guided them through their first programs. Her presence brought a spark to the town, her laughter a reminder that she'd come home. James, too, had changed. He took on bigger contracts, repairing systems for factories across the county, his reputation growing as a man who fixed more than machines. He mended trust, built bridges. His days were long, but each night he returned to Sophia, their evenings filled with quiet talks under the stars or shared meals that tasted of home. The postcard, with its faded promise, now sat framed on their mantel, a testament to the years they'd waited and the choice they'd made. Tonight, under the lanterns, Sophia stood in a simple white dress, its hem brushing her ankles, her hair loose and catching the light. James, in a crisp shirt and jeans, looked at her with a tenderness that silenced the world. The crowd hushed as he raised a glass, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "To Sophia," he said, "who came back and made me believe in promises again." Her eyes glistened, and she squeezed his hand, her own voice soft but clear. "To James, who never stopped being my home." They danced to a slow song, their steps unpolished but sure, the sycamore's leaves rustling above. Later, as the guests drifted home, James and Sophia sat on the porch steps, her head resting on his shoulder. The night was cool, the air carrying the faint scent of earth and pine. "You ever miss it?" James asked, his voice low. "Atlanta, the lights, all of it?" Sophia tilted her head, her eyes tracing the stars. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I look at you at this, and I know I'd miss you more. I chose this, James. I choose you every day." Her words settled over him, warm and certain, easing the last traces of doubt. He pressed a kiss to her temple, his arm tightening around her. "I'll keep you, Soph," he murmured. "Every day. Every promise." She smiled, her fingers lacing through his, and they sat in silence. The town around them, quiet but alive. Fairview stretched out before them, its modest homes glowing under the moonlight. The house next door, once empty, now held Sophia's belongings, a sign of her return. Their future wasn't certain. Challenges would come, from skeptical friends to the pull of Sophia's past. But they faced it together. Their love a choice made not in haste, but in courage. Under the sycamore, in a town that held their history, James and Sophia had built something new, a happiness earned through time, trust, and a vow kept.